All right, so today we're going to take a deep dive into happiness.
Okay.
And, we've got a great article here by Al Wynant. It's
Mm-hmm.
called The Pursuit and Practice of Happiness. And, it's funny because when we think about happiness,
Right.
especially, in today's world,
Yeah.
with everything going on,
It feels,
it feels like a lot
yeah, it can.
to try to be happier.
Yeah, where do you even start?
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Either.
But Wynant's article is great because it really lays out these very practical steps
Yes.
that anybody can take.
And I think what's so interesting about his journey is that he realizes that happiness, it isn't
Right.
like a one-size-fits-all.
No,
You know,
for sure.
it's multifaceted. And he even talks about his own personal experience,
Yeah.
like, with his marriage and his work and different areas of his life where
Right.
he's found
Yeah, and I think
happiness in others.
we've all kind of felt that, right?
Yeah.
Like you feel more fulfilled
Yeah.
in some areas than others.
Absolutely.
But it's not just about, identifying those areas. It's about figuring out,
Right. How do we...
amplify those.
Yes, exactly. And I think that's where,
Yes.
Wynant's article
Hmm.
really shines because he brings in Aristotle's philosophy.
Yes. And this is key because, Aristotle, he believed that happiness is not something that just happens to you. It's actually a goal that you work towards through, choices and actions that you make.
Yeah, I like that.
So it's not just,
Yeah.
you're not just passively, waiting for happiness to find you.
Right.
You're actually taking an active role.
Okay, so that brings us to action.
Yeah.
And it's funny because the UN actually declared March 20th as the
Yes.
International Day of Happiness.
I love that.
It makes you wonder, like,
Why did it take so long?
I know, why did it take us so long to figure this out?
But I think it's great because it really does recognize, happiness as this fundamental
Yeah.
human need.
A fundamental human need that we all have.
Yeah, and it's encouraging this idea of well-being.
Right.
And I think that's what,
And it's something to celebrate,
yes.
and to really actively pursue.
And speaking of pursuing happiness,
Mm.
Wynant was so inspired by this whole concept that he actually started exploring all these different strategies
Yes.
to bring more joy into his own life.
And they're so simple.
They're very simple and actionable,
Yes.
which I love.
Who doesn't love a good actionable tip?
I know exactly.
Yeah.
So, one of the simplest, but I think most powerful things he talks about is this gratitude practice.
Yeah.
Where every morning and every evening, he writes down 3 things he's grateful for.
It's so simple.
It is simple, but I think, is there a danger that could become?
Well, and that's what's interesting is
Yeah.
he finds that a lot of times he has way more than 3 things to write. So it's really about shifting your focus from what you lack to what you have an abundance of.
Yeah, I could see how just sort of shifting your thinking that way
Yes.
would make a big difference.
Absolutely.
Okay, so now for all the nature lovers out there,
Yes.
Wynant has a really great tip,
Okay.
and it involves a lot of walking.
He loves his walks.
He does.
3 times a day he walks.
3 times a day.
I know.
Wow.
He explores his neighborhood, the beach,
Wow.
hiking trails, you name it.
That's awesome. But here's the interesting thing.
What's that?
He's not a fan of structured exercise.
He's not.
So it's not about, forcing yourself to go to the gym
Right.
or do something you hate.
It's about finding something you enjoy.
Yeah, and what is it about being in nature that seems to have such a positive effect on people?
Nature just has this way of calming us.
Right.
Think about walking through the woods and how that just clears your head,
Yeah.
or listening to the waves crashing on the shore and how that can ease anxiety.
Right.
It's like a natural mindfulness practice in a way.
Okay, and speaking of mindfulness,
Yes.
Wynant is also a fan of meditation.
Yes, he is.
And he found that even short sessions, just focusing on his breath
Yeah.
can make a huge difference.
I used to think meditation was all about clearing your mind completely, which just seemed impossible.
Right.
My thoughts would be racing a mile a minute.
Totally.
But it's really more about noticing your thoughts
Right.
without judging them and just kind of gently bringing your focus back to your breath.
Yeah.
Even just a few minutes a day can be really beneficial for stress reduction and overall well-being.
So it's not about
Stopping your thoughts.
stopping your thoughts altogether. It's more
And
about
ending your relationship with them.
okay, I like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Now, another thing that Wynant emphasizes is this idea of pursuing your passions.
Yes.
And he talks about how he finds so much joy in his work as a writer and in connecting with others.
Yeah.
So it's all about finding that thing
Yeah.
that you're really passionate about.
That sweet spot where your
Yeah.
work aligns with your passions and feels really soul-filling.
Okay, but that raises a challenge for a lot of people. Like,
Yes.
how do you find that purpose in work?
How do you find joy in work?
That might not feel fulfilling.
Absolutely. Let's explore that.
Yeah.
One strategy is to focus on what you can control.
Okay.
Maybe you can't, like, change the entire company culture single-handedly.
Right.
But you can focus on things like building positive relationships with your colleagues,
Okay.
creating a workspace that really inspires you, setting small goals that align with your values.
Yeah, and that I can see.
Even those small shifts in perspective can make a big difference.
It's like taking ownership over your experience.
Exactly.
Yes. Yeah.
Finding those little pockets of joy and fulfillment within your current situation.
It's so easy to get bogged down in the things you can't change.
Absolutely.
Right.
So it's really powerful to remember what you can.
Yeah, and Wynant also has this great strategy for dealing with overwhelm at work.
Okay.
So when he's feeling stressed, he takes a moment to reconnect with the bigger picture.
I love that.
Like, what is the purpose behind all of this?
That sense of purpose that drives his work.
Yeah, it's like taking a step back,
Yes.
reminding yourself why you're doing it in the first place.
Exactly.
And, Wynant also talks about something that I think is so important, and that is sharing happiness with others.
Yes.
It's not just about, cultivating this joy within ourselves. It's about spreading it outward.
Absolutely. Creating a ripple effect of positivity.
And, it seems like happiness is something that just thrives when it's shared.
It does.
It fosters this sense of connection and community. So I'd love to hear, Wynant's thoughts on how we can bring more joy to our families, our friendships, even our workplaces.
Wynant highlights the power of creating little traditions within your family. Like maybe you have a weekly game night or Sunday breakfast. Any kind of ritual that brings everybody together.
I love that.
And builds those shared experiences, creates memories, and strengthens those bonds.
And what about with friendships?
With friendships.
How can we nurture those connections?
Even small gestures can go a long way.
Yeah.
Sending a quick text, making a phone call, grabbing coffee with a friend.
Yeah.
Just letting your friends know that you're thinking about them.
Totally.
And that you care.
Now, what about in the workplace?
In the workplace?
How do we share happiness?
It can be something as simple as celebrating wins together, acknowledging people's contributions, just creating moments of lightness and laughter.
Yeah.
You could organize team-building activities or just find ways to bring some fun into the workday.
It's all about fostering
a more positive,
a supportive environment where people feel appreciated.
Yes, and connected. And I think, that's something we all
need that.
Benefit from.
Yes.
Okay, so we've talked about gratitude, nature, meditation, meaningful work, nurturing relationships. So where do we go from here?
Well, Wynant also touches on something that's really important.
Okay.
And that's finding joy at work.
Oh, yeah.
Which I think is a challenge for a lot of people.
Absolutely. Work is such a huge part of our lives.
It is.
So finding ways to make it more enjoyable is crucial.
Yes.
So what are Wynant's thoughts on that?
Well, he believes that the key to finding joy at work is aligning with a mission that truly speaks to you, something that feels soul-filling.
So it's not just about finding a job you're good at. It's about finding work that, really resonates with your values and gives you a sense of purpose.
Yeah.
That's a pretty tall order. He uses his own example, like finding purpose in making a positive impact on other people's lives.
Yeah.
When your work aligns with this larger mission, something that feels bigger than just yourself, it can make even the toughest days feel more meaningful.
Okay. But let's be realistic. Not everybody is lucky enough to have a job that they're super passionate about.
Yeah.
So what advice does Wynant offer for those who might be struggling to find that sense of purpose in their work?
He suggests focusing on what you can control.
Okay.
Maybe you can't single-handedly change the entire company culture.
Right.
But you can focus on things like cultivating positive relationships with your colleagues.
Okay.
You can create a workspace that inspires you, set small goals that align with your personal values. Even those seemingly small shifts in perspective can make a big difference.
It's about taking ownership of your experience.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Finding those pockets of joy and fulfillment within the context of your current situation.
It's so easy to get caught up in the things we can't change.
Yeah.
So focusing on what we can control, I think is a really powerful reminder.
And Winan also has a great technique for dealing with those moments when we feel overwhelmed at work. When he's feeling stressed or bogged down, he takes a moment to reconnect with that bigger picture,
Yeah.
that sense of purpose that drives his work.
Yeah. I love that it's like taking a step back to remind yourself why you're doing what you're doing.
Exactly.
And, that can really help to shift your perspective and kind of regain a sense of motivation.
Absolutely. And shifting gears a bit, Winan also talks about the importance of sharing happiness with others. It's not just about cultivating joy within ourselves, it's about spreading that joy outwards, creating a ripple effect of positivity.
And, it makes sense because happiness seems like something that just thrives when it's shared.
Yes,
It
it is.
fosters this sense of connection and community.
Yeah.
So I'd love to hear, Wynant's thoughts on how we can bring more joy to our families, our friendships, even our workplaces.
He highlights the power of creating small traditions within your family, like having a weekly game night or maybe Sunday breakfast, any kind of ritual that brings everyone together.
Yeah, I love
Builds those shared experiences, creates memories, and strengthens those bonds.
Yeah. And what about with friendships? How can we nurture those connections and share happiness with our friends?
Even small gestures can go a long way. Sending a quick text, making a phone call, grabbing coffee with a friend.
Mm-hmm.
Just letting your friends know that you're thinking about them
Right.
and that you care.
And what about in the workplace? How do we share happiness in a professional setting?
It can be something as simple as celebrating wins together, acknowledging people's contributions, just creating moments of lightness and laughter.
Yeah.
You could organize team-building activities or just find ways to bring some fun into the workday.
It's all about fostering
A supportive environment where people feel appreciated.
yes, and connected. And I
Yeah.
think, that's something we can all benefit from.
We all need that.
Okay, so we've talked about gratitude, nature meditation, meaningful work, nurturing relationships. Now, along with finding joy at work and sharing it with others, Wynant also talks about something that's absolutely essential, prioritizing self-care.
Absolutely. He emphasizes the importance of taking time for yourself, doing things that bring you joy and rejuvenation. We often put the needs of others before our own, but neglecting our own well-being can lead to burnout and depletion.
It's like that classic analogy of putting on your own oxygen mask before helping others.
Exactly.
You can't pour from an empty cup.
You can't.
So what are some ways that we can incorporate more self-care into our lives?
Winans a big advocate for spending time in nature. We talked about his daily walks earlier, but it doesn't have to be limited to walking. It could be gardening, hiking, sitting by a lake, anything that allows you to connect with the natural world.
It's about finding those activities that help you unplug, de-stress, and recharge.
He also talks about the benefits of meditation, even short sessions where you just focus on your breath.
Meditation can be such a powerful tool for cultivating inner peace and presence.
It is.
It helps to kind of quiet the mental chatter and connect with a deeper sense of calm.
And of course, he encourages pursuing your passions, those activities that light you up and bring you genuine joy.
Whether it's painting, playing music, dancing, writing, or anything else that sparks your creative fire, it's about making time for the things that nourish your soul, even amidst the demands of daily life.
Remember, happiness is contagious when you prioritize your own well-being and cultivate joy in your own life. It ripples outward, touching the lives of those around you.
That's a beautiful thought.
Yeah.
So as we continue exploring Wynant's insights, I encourage you to reflect on these practical strategies and see what resonates most with you. It's about creating a life that feels good on the inside and out, a life filled with purpose, connection, and joy.
If you are enjoying this podcast and want more tips and resources on living your best life, give it a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button. And don't forget to tap the bell icon so you never miss an update. We've got amazing content coming your way.
Welcome back to our deep dive. We've been talking about all these different strategies for cultivating happiness,
Yeah.
gratitude, nurturing relationships, finding joy at work, even prioritizing self-care. I have to admit, it's making me think about my own life and all the little things I could be doing to boost my own happiness.
And if you're feeling a little overwhelmed by all of these different strategies, don't worry. The beauty of Wynant's approach is that you can start small.
Okay.
And gradually incorporate these into your life.
That makes me feel a lot better.
Yeah.
Small, manageable steps are definitely more my style.
Absolutely.
One thing that keeps coming up in Wynant's article is this idea of mindfulness.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a buzzword these days.
It is.
So I'd love to kind of unpack what it actually means in the context of happiness.
Mindfulness is all about being fully present in the moment without judgment.
Okay.
It's about paying attention to your thoughts, your feelings, and sensations without getting swept away by them.
So it's not about emptying your mind completely.
Right.
It's more about just observing them.
Observing your thoughts and feelings with a sense of curiosity and acceptance. And there are so many simple ways to practice mindfulness throughout the day.
Mm-hmm.
One of the easiest is to just focus on your breath.
Okay.
Just take a few deep breaths. Notice the rise and fall of your chest as you inhale and exhale.
Yeah.
You can do this anywhere, anytime.
I've heard about that technique before. It sounds so simple.
Yeah, it is.
I can see how taking those few moments to just breathe and be present could really shift your mindset.
Absolutely. Another way to practice mindfulness is to really engage your senses.
Okay.
Pay attention to the sights, the sounds, the smells, the tastes, the textures around you.
Mm-hmm.
Take a moment to savor your morning coffee. Notice the way the sunlight filters through the trees.
Yeah.
Or really listen to the sounds of nature on your walk.
Right.
It's about appreciating those everyday experiences that we often take for granted.
It's like hitting the pause button on autopilot, or really tuning into the world around us.
Exactly.
I imagine that takes practice, though.
It does take practice.
Our minds tend to wander, especially in our busy, tech-filled world.
Yeah, but that's okay. When you find your mind wandering, just gently guide it back to the present moment.
Mm-hmm.
Don't get discouraged if it happens a lot at first. It's all part of the process.
So how does mindfulness actually contribute to happiness?
Well, when you're practicing mindfulness,
Yeah.
you're less likely to get caught up in those negative thought patterns and worries.
Okay.
You're able to appreciate those simple joys in life more fully.
Mm-hmm.
And you're more likely to make choices that are aligned with your values and your well-being.
It's like you're creating more space for positivity and joy to enter your life.
Exactly. Mindfulness helps you break free from those automatic, often negative thought patterns that can trap you in a cycle of unhappiness.
So it's not about eliminating negative thoughts altogether.
Right.
It's about changing your relationship to them.
Exactly. Mindfulness allows you to observe those thoughts and feelings without judgment, which gives you more freedom to choose how you want to respond to them.
It's about cultivating that sense of inner peace and resilience.
Yes.
Which I think is so essential for navigating the ups and downs of life.
Absolutely. And that brings us back to Winant's central message.
Yeah.
We've explored all of his practical strategies for cultivating happiness, gratitude, nurturing relationships, finding joy at work, prioritizing self-care, practicing mindfulness. And what ties it all together is this idea that happiness isn't some elusive destination.
Right.
It's a choice that we make every single day.
And it's a choice that's within our reach.
It is.
No matter what our circumstances might be.
Exactly.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I encourage you to reflect on all these insights.
Yes.
See what resonates most with you.
Yeah.
What small step can you take today to bring more happiness into your own life and the lives of those around you?
Remember, happiness is a journey, not a destination.
I love that.
Embrace the imperfections, celebrate the joys, and keep practicing those small acts of kindness, both towards yourself and others.
Beautifully said, and I think that's the perfect note to end on. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into happiness.
It's been a pleasure.
We hope you found these insights helpful, and we wish you all the best on your own personal journey to cultivate more joy and fulfillment in your life.